The snow gently fell outside, covering the city in a peaceful, silent blanket. Inside, Mia carefully applied her lipstick, glancing at the clock with a flutter of excitement. Tonight was supposed to be perfect. David had promised her a surprise Valentine's Day she would never forget. But when they drove farther from the city, the familiar warmth of their relationship seemed to fade, replaced by a creeping unease. As they pulled up to an old, dilapidated building, Mia's stomach dropped. This wasn't the romantic evening she'd imagined. What was David hiding? And what was the thing she discovered that night that changed everything? Keep listening, because you'll be shocked by what happened next. But before we start, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you'll never miss a spine-tingling episode. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to like, comment, and share the video. And if you want even more, stay connected with us on our social media platforms for more creepy content. Thank you all for being part of this journey with me. And now let's dive into the darkness together. Mia had always been a hopeless romantic. Valentine's Day to her was a time for celebrating love in all its forms. But this year, it was supposed to be extra special. After nearly 2 years of dating, her boyfriend David had promised her a surprise, a romantic evening she would never forget. They had been through some ups and downs, but Mia felt secure in their relationship, and David was always the charming, attentive guy who could make her feel like the most important person in the world. It was the evening of February 14th. The city was coated with a soft layer of snow, and the air was crisp but not unbearable. Mia was excited as she dressed up for their night out, feeling a mix of excitement and a little nervousness about the surprise he had planned. David had told her not to worry about dinner, as he had already made reservations at a special place outside of town. The specifics of the place were vague, but Mia didn't question it. After all, David was usually full of surprises. When David picked her up, his smile was warm, and his eyes glinted with the kind of affection Mia had grown used to. They drove in silence for a while, the radio playing softly in the background, and Mia couldn't help but wonder where they were going. It wasn't like David to be secretive. Eventually, they reached the outskirts of town, where the bright lights of the city were replaced by the eerie quiet of empty streets and old buildings. The further they went, the more unsettled Mia became. "David, where are we going?" she asked, trying to hide the nerves creeping up her spine. He smiled, squeezing her hand. "You'll see soon. Trust me." The car finally came to a stop outside an old, run-down building, a place that looked like it had been abandoned for years. The dim, flickering lights gave it an almost otherworldly feel. Mia's stomach dropped. "David, is this where we're eating?" He laughed softly, nodding. "Yes, it's an old house, but it's the perfect place for tonight. Trust me." Reluctantly, Mia followed him out of the car and into the building, which had an unsettling, musty smell. It felt cold inside, and the decor was outdated, with wallpaper peeling off the walls. She looked around, feeling a chill down her spine. This place didn't feel like any romantic restaurant she had imagined. It felt off. But David was already leading her deeper into the building. He opened a door that led into a cozy room with a large fireplace, a dinner table set for two, and candles that flickered softly in the dim light. Mia breathed a sigh of relief. It was beautiful, even if the surroundings were strange. They sat down to a quiet dinner, and for a while, everything felt normal. They laughed, shared stories, and talked about their future. It was the kind of evening Mia had imagined. But as the night wore on, something started to feel wrong. David had been quieter than usual. He was staring at her with an intensity that she didn't recognize. His eyes were too wide, too unblinking, and there was something almost cold in them. His skin had taken on an odd, pallid tone, and he didn't seem to notice it. She brushed it off as a trick of the candlelight. When they finished eating, he suggested they go upstairs to get comfortable. Mia felt a slight unease, but it wasn't until they reached the top of the stairs that things took a strange turn. The room at the end of the hallway was completely dark, and when David opened the door, the air inside felt frigid. as though it had been untouched for years. Mia stepped inside, and before she could react, David slammed the door shut behind her. "David? What's going on?" she asked, her voice shaky. But David didn't respond. He was standing at the door, staring at her, a strange smile playing at the corners of his lips. "David? What's happening?" Mia repeated, now feeling truly scared. The warmth from the downstairs had evaporated, and all she could feel was the bone-chilling cold that seemed to surround her. David took a step forward, and that's when she noticed the change. His eyes. They were no longer the warm, affectionate brown that Mia had grown accustomed to. They were black, completely black, devoid of any humanity. His smile widened, but it wasn't the smile of the man she loved. It was twisted, unnatural. "You've been so trusting, Mia. I never told you the truth about myself. Did you really think I was human?" Mia stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat. This wasn't David. It couldn't be. She turned to the door, trying to escape, but it wouldn't budge. The room seemed to close in on her, the air growing thick with an unbearable pressure. David, no, whatever he was now, stepped closer. "I've been waiting for this day for so long. You see, I've never been what you thought. I'm not alive, Mia. Not anymore." She felt the blood drain from her face as he reached out toward her, his cold, skeletal hand hovering just inches from her skin. "You shouldn't have come here," he whispered, his voice now a low, guttural growl. "You were always meant to be part of this." Mia turned, screaming as she ran toward the window, but it was too late. The glass shattered as something unseen slammed into it, and she was pulled back into the darkness, her cries echoing in the cold, empty room. David, the demon, or whatever he had become, watched silently as Mia disappeared, his expression unreadable. The next morning, the house was empty. No signs of struggle, no trace of Mia. It was as if she had vanished without a trace. The authorities found the building weeks later, abandoned and decayed, with nothing left behind except a chilling feeling of something ancient and malevolent. And though they searched for any evidence of what had happened to Mia, no one ever saw her again. As for David, his name was never found in any records. No one could recall anyone matching his description, and the place where he had taken Mia was an old, forgotten building that shouldn't have even been on the map. Some say that on cold nights, if you listen closely, you can hear her cries echoing through the halls of that place. Lost to something beyond death, and forever tied to the man she thought she loved. I'll admit it, I've always been an oddball, a loner, someone who preferred solitude, and truthfully, I've never been fond of crowds or people in general. So, it's a bit strange that the scariest experience of my life happened on Valentine's Day. After I graduated high school, I didn't follow the typical path. College didn't appeal to me, not only because I couldn't afford it, but also because I didn't have any idea what I wanted to do with my life. So, I decided to take some time to figure it out. I started working at a gas station to make ends meet. It was a dumpy little place, the kind of station that truckers didn't think much of. I remember one guy pulling in, clearly annoyed, seeing me scrolling on my phone while I waited for him to finish getting his snacks. He shot me a judgmental look and told me I should take more responsibility for how bad the place looked. I didn't bother correcting him since I wasn't the owner. I just rang him up and asked if that was all he needed before he left. Valentine's Day came around a few years ago, and I volunteered for the night shift, mostly because the pay was a little higher. Plus, the store was usually pretty quiet, so I didn't mind the calm hours. I'd usually pass the time scrolling through memes on Reddit, but that night, something felt off. I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my chest. It's not like me to get spooked, but that night, I felt an unsettling presence I couldn't explain. It wasn't something I usually believed in. Paranormal stuff just wasn't my thing. But around midnight, that strange anxiety crept over me, and it stuck. I kept trying to shake it off, but around 1:15 a.m., the door chimed, and I looked up to see a man walk in. I'll never forget his face. His eyes were strange, like there was something deeply wrong with him. They made my skin crawl. He didn't walk slowly. He moved quickly, like he knew exactly what he was looking for, and didn't waste a second. It was eerie. When he approached the counter, he set a small gardening shovel, duct tape, and a length of rope on the counter. My mind immediately jumped to the worst possible scenario. Was this guy a serial killer? It felt like I had stepped into a horror movie. I snapped out of my thoughts when I asked if he needed anything else, and he simply pointed at the cigarettes behind me. I placed a pack of Marlboros on the counter, and then he raised 2 fingers, silently indicating he wanted another pack. As I rang up his items, I could hear his breathing speeding up, like he was getting annoyed at the slow pace. Trying to ease the tension, I joked, "Got a gardening date tonight?" But his face remained completely blank, and he didn't respond. He made direct eye contact with me and just nodded, like he had no interest in humor at all. When I told him his total, $34, he slapped down 2 20s, grabbed his items without asking for a bag, and darted out the door. I watched him go from the window, my curiosity getting the best of me. What was he up to? Why those items? Was I actually interacting with a serial killer? My thoughts raced until I saw him suddenly slam on his brakes and turn his truck around. Panic set in. I bolted back inside, locked the doors, flipped the closed sign, and dialed 911. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I told the dispatcher my location, putting the phone down as I braced myself. I really wasn't sure if I was going to make it out of this night alive. Then came the sound of heavy knocking on the door. It was him. He was trying to get in. My only defense was a gardening shovel I grabbed from the aisle, clutching it like it would save my life. "The police are on their way," I shouted through the door, though I wasn't even sure I believed it myself. I knew the doors were made of thick plastic, bulletproof, at least for a while, but I wasn't entirely convinced that would stop him. For a moment, everything went silent, and I thought maybe he'd given up. But then, he broke one of the windows and tossed in a lit match, setting part of the store on fire. I scrambled to put it out as best as I could before he sped off into the night. The police arrived about 20 minutes later, and one of them made a joke about the guy's attempt to burn the place down, but I was too shaken to care. I told them everything from the beginning, but I still have no idea what his goal was. Maybe he wanted to eliminate a witness, or maybe he was just a random psychopath. Whatever it was, he was dangerous. Even though it was years ago, I still can't shake the image of those items he bought. I still wonder if he was planning to hurt someone he'd already kidnapped. As much as I try to put it behind me, that night stays with me, and Valentine's Day will never be the same. It was February 14th, 2016, Valentine's Day. I had planned the perfect evening for my girlfriend. We went to a cozy little restaurant that we both loved, and after a nice dinner, I suggested we drive to the beach. We'd always enjoyed walking along the shore in the evenings. Something about the quiet, the sound of the waves, and the cool breeze made it feel like our own little peaceful escape from the rest of the world. But that night, it didn't feel like the peaceful nights we were used to. We had been to this beach several times before, but tonight was different. I pulled the car into a secluded parking lot far away from the pier and the lighthouse. This lot wasn't well known, mostly because it was out of the way, too far from the usual tourist spots. But that was exactly why I chose it. We needed privacy, and I wanted us to have a moment to ourselves. The idea of having the place to ourselves on Valentine's Day sounded perfect. I backed the car into a space, positioning us so we were facing the long, dark road that led us to this quiet corner of the beach. The lot itself was slightly lower than the road above, with a small slope that led down to it. The night was chilly, and we settled in, listening to some music while I shared a few creepy stories I'd found online. It was a perfect evening. The air felt calm, and I thought everything was going exactly as planned. After about 30 minutes, though, something strange happened. I noticed headlights coming toward us from the road above. It was a truck, and it was speeding. I didn't think much of it at first. People always sped down this road. There weren't any police hiding around here, and the road was mostly empty. Drivers often took advantage of that, especially at night. But there was something unsettling about the way this truck was moving. It was coming at us much faster than usual, and my gut instinct told me something wasn't right. My heart began to race as the truck got closer. It wasn't slowing down. I watched as the truck approached the parking lot at full speed. The way it lifted slightly off the ground as it hit the slope made it seem almost like the driver didn't care about control. For a moment, I thought the truck might fly off the edge of the lot. I didn't even hesitate. "Duck!" I shouted at my girlfriend. Without thinking twice, I slammed my own body down into my seat, trying to hide as much as possible. My hands shot to the car keys, ready to start the engine in case we had to leave quickly. I tried to make light of the situation, forcing a nervous laugh. "I guess some people are really rushing to get to their Valentine's Day plans," I said, trying to break the tension. She didn't laugh, though. Her face was tight with concern, and I could tell she was nervous. The truck raced past us, kicking up dust as it tore through the lot and came to a stop about 50 yards away, near where the sand met the pavement. I thought it had finally stopped, but something about it felt off. The truck didn't park like a normal vehicle. It came to a jarring stop, angled at a strange, careless angle, as if the driver hadn't even tried to line it up. The truck's engine kept running, and I could see the faint glow of its brake lights cutting through the darkness. A knot tightened in my stomach as I sat still, waiting, unsure of what was going to happen next. Then the truck doors flung open, and two men jumped out. They didn't waste any time, immediately running toward the water, shouting loudly. It was 9 p.m., and the whole area was dark. The kind of dark where shadows seemed to stretch and swallow everything. The men disappeared into the darkness, their shouting echoing briefly before fading away. Then, silence. The kind of silence that made your skin crawl. I turned to my girlfriend, and we both exhaled at the same time. We were both holding our breath, not knowing what to think. For a few minutes, nothing happened. The truck just sat there, idling in the dark. I could hear the faint sound of waves crashing nearby, but the strange encounter had shattered the peacefulness of the night. Just as I thought the worst was over, the men reappeared, running back toward the truck as quickly as they had left. They jumped into the vehicle and without hesitation, sped off, racing down the same road they had come from. The whole thing had lasted only a few minutes, but it felt like an eternity. We sat there for a moment, still processing what we had just witnessed. My girlfriend was visibly shaken, and I could feel my pulse racing as I slowly started the car. Neither of us said much. We just drove away, the silence between us heavy with unanswered questions. We didn't talk much on the drive back, both of us lost in our thoughts, trying to piece together the strange events that had unfolded. I kept replaying the whole scene in my head. What had they been doing? Why had they been shouting? What was in that truck? And why had they been so quick to leave? The next day at work, during lunch, I told a coworker about the experience. She seemed interested but skeptical, so she pulled out her phone to see if anyone had posted about anything strange happening at the beach that night. I didn't expect anything to come up, but to my surprise, she found an article about an incident at the same beach. My heart skipped a beat as she began reading it aloud. The article was about a 20-year-old man who had been attacked on the HMA pier that Sunday night, around 9:15 p.m. The attack had been violent, and the authorities were still investigating it. My stomach sank as I realized the men in the truck must have been involved. The timing matched perfectly, and they fit the description in the article. Everything lined up. I hadn't contacted the police at the time because I didn't have much to give them. I couldn't identify the truck, let alone the model, color, or anything that might have helped. The parking lot had been too dark for me to get a clear look at the men's faces, and I felt like I didn't have enough to be helpful. I hoped someone else would have seen more details that could aid the investigation. Looking back, I believe those men drove to our parking lot and ran to the beach to wash away any evidence that might have tied them to the crime. That's why they acted so quickly. They didn't want to leave anything behind that could link them to the attack. If you've experienced a terrifying event or have a horror story to tell, we at AG Horrors want to hear from you. Share your experiences with us on Reddit, and let's uncover the mysteries hiding in the shadows together. And if you want to support the channel and help us bring even more terrifying content, consider checking out our support options on Patreon or Ko-fi. Your support means the world to us. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more spine-chilling stories like this one. And now, stay tuned for the next horror episode.